Live from ZTN studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Welcome to our virtual discussion, The Role of Parliament in a Pandemic. Hello, I'm your host, Andy Hodges. This broadcast is brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network, ZTN, and our partners, the Southern Africa Parliamentary Support Trust, SAPS, and USAID. If you have any comments or views on our program this morning, please feel free to contact us via our Facebook page, Zimpaper's TV network, or via our Twitter handle @ZTN News. The Parliament of Zimbabwe has a set and clearly defined constitutional role in the governance of the country. In broad terms, its mandate is making laws for peace, order and good governance of Zimbabwe. Of course, the most prominent role of Parliament is the legislative function, but it also conducts oversight of all organs of state. Parliament performs executive oversight by scrutinizing government policies, programs and expenditure plans in order to ensure that they are in line with legislative intent and are governed by documented policies and procedures. In a constitutional democracy like Zimbabwe, the executive is accountable to Parliament as a body elected to represent the will of the people. So this is clear. But what happens during a pandemic, and where even Parliament is affected and its members are equally at risk from the COVID-19. We are joined virtually this morning to discuss the role of Parliament in a pandemic by Dr. Ruth Labode, Health and Childcare Parliamentary Portfolio Chairperson, Itai Rusikek, Executive Director at Community Working Group on Health, CWGH, and Fadzai Jekemu, she's Programs Officer at Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. Ruth, let me start with you. Zimbabwe Parliament's normal role, as I said, can be broadly defined as making laws for peace, order and good governance of Zimbabwe. Further, it can be said that Parliament's mission is to represent and act as a voice of the people and overseeing executive action. So what, in your opinion, is the role of Parliament during a pandemic?
Good morning, viewers. The role of a parliamentarian, really what the reality on the ground. COVID was a novelty and Parliament had never experienced it. So the first, especially after 47 MPs had tested positive in the first wave of COVID, the first thing was for the Speaker to just say, close Parliament, everybody go home and quarantine yourself or stay in your homes. And then, and by that time, we, as Parliament also, were not so acquainted to the Zoom and virtual meetings. So the first phase, we actually literally did nothing except participate in virtual meetings with private sector, with the SADC and AU. But this time around, because already we had introduced virtual meetings in Parliament, when the second wave came and we then decided government went on a lockdown, our roles now became a remote control. In other ways, we have had oversight meetings with the Ministry of Health, which is the one that we oversight on their strategy for controlling COVID-19. We were able, after the information they'd given us, it's not the same as a one-to-one meeting, a physical meeting, but when we collected that information, we were able to follow up with hospitals on phones. And then to follow up on the funding to know if there are accountability of funds. It's difficult doing it remote, but that is the role that we're able to play. We are not even able to play a role with our communities, except via WhatsApp groups, where the only information you are getting is yes.
So, Ruth, then, you may be doing virtual meetings, like if you look at your committee, but it also means that basically Parliament has stopped, that you can't pass laws, which is one of the major functions of Parliament. You can't, there's some critical laws that are on the book. So apart from the pandemic, of course, the business must continue, so to speak, in governing the country. So you can't even pass laws where you're sitting at the moment as Parliament. Is that correct?
It's correct. It's a time where then the presidential executive powers take precedence. We cannot even approve expenditure. If Minister of Finance decided he wants to spend 100, ideally, he should actually get approval from Parliament. But when it's an emergency like this, it's passed through the executive powers. There's no law you can pass, because before you pass a law, there's public hearings, there's There are a lot of processes that are impossible to do when there's a lockdown.
Let me come to you, Itai. You heard there what Dr. Laborde said. She said during this time of a pandemic, and I quote her, executive powers take precedence. So what in your opinion should the role of Parliament be in a pandemic? Should they be doing anything outside of their ordinary course of business as well?
Yes, thank you very much, the host, and thank you very much to Dr. Laborde. I think it is important for us to also appreciate that COVID-19, has given some governments, not just here in Africa, but even across the globe, some formidable, executive powers. What we have seen is there's been an element even of abuse of those powers by various governments. And unfortunately, some of these measures that have been taken to a greater extent have become more or less like permanent, measures. And unfortunately, that has led to, rights and even violations, of democratic spaces. So like what Ruth said, I think it is important that we should also appreciate that, the response to COVID-19 pandemic is not just, for the health system, and it is also not just for the executive. Parliament should continue in a pandemic to play their oversight role and to make sure that they hold, the executive, accountable. What we are seeing in Zimbabwe right now is that decisions mostly concerning, the lockdown measures, they are so much top-down heavy. Sometimes I'm sure members of parliament are also surprised when they hear an announcement that the lockdown has been extended without the executive going to parliament, to even brief parliament before the extension. Right now, we are looking at the issue of procurement of vaccines. I'm sure parliamentarians are also in the dark, just like a majority of Zimbabweans, in terms of where exactly are we going to procure this vaccine? Which brand are we going to use? And even on the issue of the resources, we are hearing of a war chest of 100 million being mobilized. Where is this money coming from? In a normal setup, 100 million is a lot of money. And the Minister of Finance should be going to Parliament to seek parliamentary approval, for him to be able to utilize 100 million. That's a lot of money, 100 million US dollars. Similarly, even on the issue of procurement of these vaccines, the doses, we need Parliament to play their part in terms of even summoning the Minister of Health to come and explain to Parliament why are we going to buy, for instance, say from Russia? What are the advantages of purchasing our vaccines from Russia? And the Parliament has to play a role in that. Similarly, we also see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me turn to you, Fadzai, and I want to pick up on something there that Itai said, and that's, of course, Parliament's oversight role, which is critical, and the fact that we're now, as Ruth said, basically under executive powers because it takes precedence during a pandemic. But in your opinion, let me ask you the same question. What do you think the role of Parliament should be in a pandemic? Should it be business as usual? Because, I mean, Ruth said it there, over 53 MPs were tested positive. So these are people as well who are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and their families. So obviously their safety is also paramount, as well as them trying to balance the ability to carry out their functions. Your comment, Fadzai?
Thank you, Andy. I think the Constitution is clear in terms of Section 119, whereby the legislature has a critical role to play in overseeing the government of Zimbabwe's responses and to monitor and evaluate the reasonableness in terms of the responses that they are doing during and post the pandemic. So we're not saying the whole parliament should be active, but also as we have, like the Minister of Health, the essential services. So within Parliament, there's some committees that we think that should be also in essential service mode. For example, the Committee on Budget, the Committee on Public Accounts, as well as the Committee on Health. Those are the key committees which should not be on total lockdown during such a time, because the expenditures, like what Itai said, they really need to be monitored as well as be accounted for.
Ruth, I want to keep on going about this issue of oversight because, of course, Parliament has the powers to conduct oversight of all organs of state, including those at provincial and local government level. But during a pandemic, it may be tempting, of course, to cut corners, so to speak. So how much oversight is Parliament actually carrying out? Because it appears from what you're stating that it seems to be little or none at the moment. Your comment?
Yes, we did oversight. Parliament even met virtual. It would be a fallacy actually to think that even the ministry would be afraid to meet with a full committee when the pandemic was at its peak. We have lost 4 MPs, and that's too much. I would not have gone, actually. That sacrifice I would not have made. I don't want to lie. So we did do my committee. I'm on Zoom and virtual meetings twice or 3 times a day with the ministries, with hospitals, with various interested parties. And the committee, as a committee, we have met twice with the Minister of Health. Normally, when there's no COVID, we'll probably meet the ministry to interface once in 3 months. So interfacing, we met, but it's just that in that once in 3 months when we meet the ministry, the difference is that we can then do a follow-up. If they say they were given so much money by the Global Fund, we can follow up immediately. But when it's virtual, you receive the information. Now you start trying to make meetings or to verify via the phone. And I know for sure the budget committee also did do some virtual meetings, some virtual oversight meetings. If the nation says, yes, I know there are essential services that are open, and there is, those of you who've been to Parliament know the structure of Parliament. That's that one huge building, which is dependent on the air conditioning. So you just need 1 MP in that room where there are 300 people to be positive, and the virus will just be moving around. This is why every time the MPs came, there were a number tested and they were positive. The environment is such that it's not conducive to hold meetings there.
Itai, you know, the nature of pandemics... Sorry, Dr. Labode. You wanted to finish?
No, it's okay. I'll come back again.
Okay, Itai, the nature of pandemics, as I said just now, means that oftentimes normal processes get suspended or ignored in the spirit of haste and circumstance, to be honest. So how do you believe that Parliament should manage this process to avoid abuse?
Yes, I think one of the things that we should also appreciate is that COVID-19 has given us other opportunities that we never used to have. Now you can see our members of Parliament can now operate online virtually. And we also feel that our members of Parliament, because they are the representatives of the people, there is also need for them to be, you know, the COVID-19 ambassadors. They also need for members of Parliament to be COVID-19 champions, because there's still an information gap out there. And the members of Parliament can be that vehicle, you know, for information flow to their various constituencies. Not necessarily them going there physically, but if you look, almost every member of Parliament, either they've got a WhatsApp group, which they use to share information with their constituency, And I feel communities cannot remain bystanders. We need to make sure that our response is also informed by, the views and the inputs coming from the communities. And now that we are not able to have face-to-face meetings, and I hope members of parliament are also becoming very innovative in terms of engaging, their various, constituencies, so that the positions that are then taken by the national government would then have, the views, the inputs, of the communities. And the other challenge that we see is that there's an element of, compliance, challenges with compliance, mainly because communities, in most cases, are not fully involved. So members of parliament can play that role, and I'm sure they are playing that role to a greater extent of making sure that they involve communities, they get inputs from various, constituencies which they represent. So COVID-19, yes, it's a terrible disease, it's a bad disease, but it has also enhanced our, ICT, skills, and especially to our members of parliament, because now they can engage virtually with their constituencies and then link with the executive and so forth, so that there's no gap in terms of the democratic process, in terms of the oversight role that is played by honorable members.
Okay, Fadzai, I want to keep on about oversight, because the oversight by Parliament extends to the monitoring of the performance of government departments through establishing compliance, I think Itai said that there, with rules and regulations, as well as other best practices where there are no formalized procedures. So how, in your opinion, can, first of all, Parliament ensure that this oversight happens? And in fact, can such temporary relaxed processes during the pandemic that we're in right now, can it open the door to abuse, corruption, and fiscal financial mismanagement?
To respond to your second part, precisely, because we see the Auditor General's report year in, year out, expose a lot of corruption, a lot of abuse of funds, a lot of abuse of power, which happens with oversight. Now, if we're saying that we don't have oversight and there are huge amounts of money to be spent, clearly corruption will find a good breeding ground in such circumstances. For Parliament, maybe they could actually collaborate with institutions like PRAZ to ensure that the Procurement Regulations Authority of Zimbabwe, to ensure that the procurement which is happening at the moment is directly linked to mitigating the COVID-19 pandemic. We see also situations, an example would be the former Minister of Health, Dr. Obadiah Moyo, who was arrested, actually out on allegations of abuse of office during a pandemic. So if the oversight of Parliament is not strengthened during such times, it then means that the nation is going to lose more than gain the mitigation of COVID-19, of the pandemic.
You're watching our virtual discussion this morning, or this afternoon now, the role of Parliament in a pandemic. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Southern Africa Parliamentary Support Trust, SAPS, and USAID. Ruth, I want to get onto something there that Itai mentioned, which is critical, particularly during a pandemic, and that's the role that parliamentarians play in communicating the issues to their constituents and communities. So I want to get onto that. I mean, he talked about being able to talk to your constituents and via WhatsApp groups and possibly by virtual means. But it's critical, of course, that these ordinary Zimbabwean or Zimbabwean citizens learn about what's going on from you, their representatives. So how are parliamentarians managing to keep in touch with their constituents and give them the right messaging about COVID-19 and some of the issues and some of the vaccination, for example, the rollout plan, and whether it's safe or not? How are you doing it?
We've been doing a fantastic job. This is why I said, this morning, I actually had a committee meeting, virtual. And we're receiving reports from various members of parliament on how they are communicating this. And this is why we raised the issue that we are underestimating the number of people who come out for the vaccine. There will be more than what we have ordered because of the communication with the constituencies. How is it happening? In the urban setup, it's amazing the number of groups, WhatsApp groups that are talking about COVID, even informing each other that at house number so there's a COVID case that has died. Please don't go there. Just send your money if you want. I participate in these groups and I hear how people are actually talking about it. And there are groups, there are a lot of WhatsApp groups that are inviting technical civil society organizations to come and talk to their community members. I was invited to a Pumula group. I was invited to Enkai group. People are invited, they keep on inviting. But for the rural setup, the issue of WhatsApp groups is not a very strong one. So we use the radio. You get yourself Voice of America, all this, they interview you with the intention in Ndebele or Ishona, with the intention of you as an MP to talk to your people. Because we know that a lot of people in the rural setup listen to radio messages. And so did our radio stations in Zimbabwe. They were conducting a lot of interviews, which were then, you hear people calling you from rural areas, Zamba, Maramba, Fungwa, they are saying, I heard you say this, so how should we handle this? So the communication is there and it's very good.
All right, Itai, I want to talk about corruption a little bit more and how Parliament's oversight role should help and assist in fighting the war against corruption, which of course is the government's stated aim. They want to reduce corruption as much as possible. You know, with the executive not bringing some of these issues, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, you know, they're saying that they found $100 million to buy vaccines. There's also other expenditure happening. They're making decisions on where to buy and what not to buy, things that should be under the mandate and authority of Parliament, and they're not doing it. So how do you think in that kind of fluid situation that Parliament can at least play a role in trying to eliminate or reduce corruption in whether it be procurement, whether it be in vaccination rollout? What would be your comment? What should they do?
Yes, you know, the issue of corruption has become endemic in Zimbabwe anyway. Like what Fadzai said, every year the Auditor General, you know, raises a red flag on the Ministry of Health. But up to now, we are yet to see anyone who has been fully prosecuted and sent to jail because of the leakages and the corruption, you know, issues, you know, within the Ministry of Health or even within some of the. But I think what is important is that, you know, Parliament has got a lot of, you know, constitutional powers. Right now, if you move around the communities, you know, there's an element of, you know, lack of confidence right now. Even on the issue of, you know, the vaccines that are yet to come, mainly because of the conflicting messages that are coming. We had, I think it was early this week, the Minister of Finance coming out saying people are going to pay for the vaccines. I think a day later, he then said he had been quoted out of context or something like that. And then the Minister of Health came out and said people are not going to pay. The President also said people are not going to pay. But within the same week, a circulates saying the government is begging for you know, donations. You know, people have to donate. So all those issues, you know, they take away confidence in the people. But Parliament have some you know, oversight powers which they can, you know, utilize, and not just on the issue of maybe resources disappearing, but right now let us look at the issue of, you know, the misinformation, disinformation on the COVID vaccine, and also the vaccine hesitance, you know, information that is floating around, and we also need Parliament to play a role in terms of demystifying, you know, that kind of false information which is, you know, floating around. I'm happy that Honorable Labode came out last week saying if the vaccine comes, she will be one of the first person to be vaccinated. That alone will give a lot of confidence, you know, to the majority of the people. And our people, they know that, you know, when we were growing up, all of us, we were vaccinated. Our children are being vaccinated, and our grandchildren will continue to be vaccinated. So vaccines are safe. But if it comes from, you know, honorable members of parliament, it then gives a lot of confidence, you know, to the ordinary person. But when it comes to the issue of leakages of resources, you know, issues of efficiency on use of, you know, the few resources available, Parliament, I'm sure, have been playing that role in terms of summoning various government departments to come and explain their expenditure, how the money was utilized, and where there are, you know, gaps they were being, you know, asked to explain. So I think our Parliament of Zimbabwe, to a greater extent, they've played that part. But maybe what they need to do now is then to link Parliament with other arms of government in the event that someone is suspected of having abused, you know, national resources. Then there should be consequences, and not just, you know, having these public hearings and matters being discussed, but no one being sent to jail. We have got a lot of people who are moving around who have taken, you know, government resources, but they have not paid any consequences from their actions.
Right, Fadzi, let me come to you. You know, you said earlier that, of course, in a normal process, normal business, if it was business as usual, which of course it's not, the executive would come to Parliament, particularly say the finance one in particular, to ask for approvals for the spending they want to do. And if you look at Dr. Labode's health committee, they would come there and obviously explain the rollout plan, the kind of money's being spent, the vaccination plan, communication strategy, etc. And that's not happening. So is there room, however, for the executive to be mandated or to be forced, if I can use that word, to come to Parliament after this is all over and account for the things that they've done to the various committees or to the full House?
Okay. To respond to that, Andy, I think what's more important is not after, for the executive to come to account after the pandemic. I think we should also have means and ways for them accounting during the pandemic, and also the spending that they're doing during the pandemic. We have a situation whereby at some point, Transparency International Zimbabwe had to go to the courts to apply for the Ministry of Health, the NatFarm, etc., and the government of Zimbabwe to bring out the COVID-19 rollout plan. What is it that they were using the donated funds and the donated PPEs for? Where did they put them, etc.? So I think Parliament can also use the same route, but of course, the going to the judiciary, it might be a long route, it might take time, but they must demand also to sit in some of these committees that are sitting right now, to have a Parliament representative within the task force, the special task force, have 2 or 3 members of Parliament in there, so that they question as these decisions are being made, not to say afterwards, then we'll start questioning. It would have lost thousands of monies.
Ruth, I want to ask you a 2-part question. You know, you said that you're holding virtual meetings every day. You're holding 2-3 meetings with your own committee, with Ministry of Health, with different hospitals, and even your own constituents. But is your committee fully aware of the government's plans in terms of issues such as which vaccine they're going to buy, what is the rollout plan, and also what is the state of our cold chain storage across the country? That's my first part. Is your committee aware of these issues? And my second part is how can you, under a COVID pandemic as we are now, how can you actually hold the executive to account if you may, for example, not agree with some of the actions they're taking? What can you actually do? 2-part question.
Thank you very much. Before I answer you, Andy, I want to answer Fazai. She said they've actually they've had an interface with the ministry asking about donor funds and other issues. Can we as a committee have that report which you actually produced? Because that's information we've been trying to get so far, yet we haven't gotten. And I think the Ministry of Finance also, because recently when I went public and said 45 million had been abused, I was condemned until the Anti-Corruption Commission reported that they had found stolen test kits somewhere. That's what vindicated me. So if you have such a report, please, can it be sent to the health committee? Because I have worked with Transparency International, and normally they would give us such a report, because that's an important report you say you have.
Okay, so
however you got it.
Fadzi, are you able to share that report with?
Now I go to your back.
Yeah, let me just ask, Fadzi, are you able to share that report with Dr. Laborde?
Yes, it's actually a court order, so we'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Dr. Laborde, she says she'll send you what she has. Anyway, please continue to my question if you don't mind.
Yes. For now, we have been told by the ministry that the minister is going to spend 100 million on a procurement of a vaccine. That has not yet been done. We have also been told that there's a vaccine we get from the AU called COVAX for free, which we will probably pay some pittance, I think, for transport and other issues. And then we are expecting a vaccine from Russia also. There are rumors about China. Generally, we have not yet to receive the report on the vaccine rollout. But on the 16th of February, the Minister of Health is coming to Parliament to actually give a full detailed report, even of current status, expenditure, and everything. Is coming to present the report to a full Parliament. We are open, by the way, on the 15th. So he's coming to give that report.
Yeah, but Ruth, I appreciate the minister's coming. Ruth, I appreciate the minister's coming on the 16th, but surely your committee, it's an important committee under a pandemic, surely you should be seriously involved in all the recommendations, the planning, before the minister comes to Parliament and talks to everybody. Your committee is vital, I would think, in the fight against COVID-19 in Zimbabwe, is it not?
Yeah, it is. But beware of thinking Parliament is an implementer. We do oversight. When you say to us, we are ordering a vaccine like this, we expect you to spend the 100 million before we come and oversight, not to sit down on a table and plan with you. No, we don't. We are not implementers.
No, but you do. But surely you do give recommendations. I mean, you must do. Surely, I mean, you're a vastly experienced committee. You don't give recommendations.
We are not technical people. So, no, we are not technical people.
Okay.
So we don't give recommendations. I sit on I sat on a committee with the minister and the University of Zimbabwe. I was also in a learning process how the University of Zimbabwe is validating various vaccines. To a point right now, as I'm talking to you, the ministry doesn't know which vaccine they are going to use, by the way.
Okay, so let me just quickly go to this announcement or the presentation to Parliament by the minister on the 16th of February. I mean, if the minister does come up and he gives a statement and you as parliamentarians disagree with the actions taken by the executive during the course of this lockdown, what tools are at your disposal to do anything about it? Because again, it's like the horse is bolted before you shut the door. There's not much you can do, is there? All you have to do is rubber stamp what the executive have done. Your comment.
Once the minister has presented his report to be debated by the full House, and if there are issues that we feel the minister was not truthful about, we have to follow them up. It means now going to Wilkins, going to NatFarm, doing all those things. After that, if the speaker feels is not happy, it's not up to my committee. He can then call the minister again, or even the constitution allows him to charge the minister with a misconduct or something.
Okay. Itai, Itai, your organization, the Community Working Group on Health, CWGH, is a network of civic community-based organizations who aim to collectively enhance community participation in health in Zimbabwe. And of course, I assume that under COVID-19, that's even more critical. But if Parliament, is not getting full reports from the minister, you heard Dr. Laborde say the minister is only coming on the 16th of February, the day after Parliament opens. Do you think that these sort of issues have an impact on your members and Zimbabwean citizens in general?
Yes, definitely. Because like right now, we need a people's vaccine, and for us to be able to defeat COVID-19, we should have, a lot of Zimbabweans, at least 80%, being vaccinated. So it is important, right, from the beginning, the population of Zimbabwe needs to be well informed about the COVID-19 vaccination rollout program. The people of Zimbabwe, they need to be informed about the procurement of the COVID-19 vaccine. The people of Zimbabwe, they also need to know where is the money coming from to procure this vaccine. And similarly, Parliament has to play that role in terms of making sure that there is transparency in the whole process right from the beginning. Right now, look at what is happening. Europe is paying a different price for the same vaccine. Uganda paid a different price for the same vaccine. South Africa paid a different price for the same vaccine. And most likely, if Zimbabwe is buying from that same company, they will also be paying a different price for the same vaccine. So these are the things that we need to take right from the beginning, not to wait until the money has been spent and there are accountability issues and so forth. So I still feel that as civil society in Zimbabwe, we should not be on the sidelines. We need to be actively involved in the whole process so that we continuously hold the executive, accountable. Because we have a challenge whereby the vaccine comes, certain groups of people are vaccinated, whilst others may not get a chance to be vaccinated. And if that happens, unfortunately, it then means condemning, the other sectors of the population, to unnecessary risk and even death. So I think the people of Zimbabwe should demand for a people's vaccine, and they should make sure that they are involved in the whole process. But of course, Parliament should also continue to play its oversight role right from the beginning, like I said, not to wait until the vaccines are here.
You're watching our virtual discussion, The Role of Parliament in a Pandemic. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Southern Africa Parliamentary Support Trust, SAPS, and USAID. I just have a final question for each of you. Let me start with you, Ruth. It's interesting, we're in a pandemic, yes, that's accepted, and of course parliamentarians are equally exposed and at risk to catching it as anybody else. I think just because you're a parliamentarian doesn't mean that you and your family shouldn't stay safe. But however, business has to continue. We can't shut down, even though we are in lockdown, we can't shut down the critical role that Parliament plays in terms of governance in Zimbabwe. So what would be your recommendations? Because don't forget, one thing that's interesting, of course, is that the lockdown was extended to the 15th of February, and I'm not sure if fundamentally anything has changed between now and the 1st of January when the lockdown was first announced. So who knows, possibly the lockdown may be extended. So, but assuming that it isn't, how can Parliament still maintain its constitutional role, its firm role in terms of ensuring the governance of Zimbabwe is carried out fairly and properly, transparently, and with accountability?
I love Zimbabwe. Zimbabweans, we're sort of hypocritical. A lot of the things that are happened, yes, we are probably under executive powers. Who tells you that money cannot be stolen even when there's no lockdown? Where our systems are prone to corruption. And that can happen lockdown or no lockdown. Of course, now it's worse because it's difficult even for Parliament to follow. Andy, we are in a situation where we are in lockdown. But we are in lockdown because our cases were hitting over 1,000 in December. To show you that that lockdown was necessary. As of yesterday, we're sitting on 65 cases, which means actually, by right, the president should go out there and announce the end of the lockdown. But we are saying we are drifting downwards with new cases. So can we just see, we might as well go up to the weekend. the lockdown has had fantastic results. Even from our partners say so. They have, of course, at a cost of other issues like corruption and and hunger, teenage pregnancies, and all those. I put them aside. But the lockdown itself in Zimbabwe has had an effect. I sit on a committee where we continuously compare results within SADC. We are doing very well with our lockdown. Interesting enough, Zambia is going over 1,000, but they are not in lockdown because they don't think they should be, for the same reason that you are talking about, that it could encourage corruption. Our committee, because just of those oversight virtual meetings we've had with the ministry, we have actually identified a lot of wrong things which have been corrected. As I'm talking to you, NatFarm workers have been fired. This happened after our committee. ZAC identified some other issues somewhere which were related to what we're talking about. It means that oversight, no matter how stupid it may look to you, is actually revealing and showing the weaknesses in the system. And I mean, I believe as Parliament, if we were to go through this issue again, my advice to Parliament, because even the last time when Parliament closed, it was my advice. I told the Speaker, let's close before we lose 200 MPs. And we say, oh, they were on duty. No, that I will not allow. We will close Parliament. Maybe we'll identify smaller groups to continue doing oversight and communicating. The problem was, for example, the budget committee or the public accounts was not now communicating with the rest of the other committees. We need to improve it, and that improvement must be done when we have this window, when we now, the lockdown is out, because we'll be interfacing physically. That's when we should correct and put systems. After the first phase of Corona, we were supposed to have an indaba to sit down and say, we have just had this pandemic. How did we handle it? What could we have done better?
Nice.
We didn't do that.
Let me ask my other two.
As a nation.
Yeah, as a nation, yes. And I mean, it's interesting because Ruth, you're right. Even if the lockdown is lifted, it's still an opportunity for Parliament to look at still virtual meetings, to look at how they can do that effectively, and also and make, do that so they can bring results in their sittings. Let me ask my other two guests, and I ask you to please answer briefly because we are running out of time. But let me start with you, Itai. Your recommendations: how can Parliament ensure they maintain their mandated role during a pandemic?
Yeah, I think as a country, we are paying the price, for the mistakes that we made during the festive season. I'm not sure whether Parliament was consulted when we opened our borders during the festive season. And when so many of us got excited because of the festive season and hosted parties and so forth, and those are more or less the super spreaders. But I still think that we need to create a balance between saving lives and also saving the economy. It is also equally important that moving forward, whatever decisions that we are going to make as a country, they should be informed by science. They should be informed by evidence. What is it that the public health experts are saying? And we should also hear from the ground, what are the people saying in terms of us moving forward? We know that majority of our people, they have to work for their daily bread. And now, with the current lockdown, unfortunately, a lot of our people do not have saving, and unfortunately, they are not able to work. So we are even creating another bigger challenge in the absence of a social safety net. So Parliament should also continue to come in to then say, the government has been promising to say they are going to give people support, the unemployed, the elderly, the orphans, and so forth. Where is that money? Because I'm yet to see anyone who has received that money. And the Parliament should continue to hold the executive accountable to say, whatever promises that you make, you should fulfill. And that the government should not only ask the people what they should do, the government should also be telling the people what the government is also going to do for its own people especially in a pandemic.
Fadzi, let me ask you the final question. It's appreciated, of course, that pandemics are unexpected and it's no longer business as usual. But commentators state that this cannot mean that Parliament gives up or ignores its critical role. So can you give us your comment on that and also any recommendations you may have?
I think...
Fadzi?
Can I go? Okay. I think as far as the representative role is concerned, it shouldn't be suspended during a pandemic. They have to ensure that they are still communicating with the constituencies that they represent. And as far as their oversight role is concerned, I mentioned earlier that there are some committees which are supposed to be in emergency mode as well, as with the executive and other stakeholders. And as far as their legislative role is concerned, they should also have a situation whereby they are monitoring the adoption of these policies, that they are coherent and also they're in response to the pandemic, even beyond the pandemic and for future pandemics that are to come. So the legislative framework should be done now or should be set now so that it can also assist for future pandemics.
Thank you. We have come to the end of today's show. You have been watching our virtual discussion, the role of Parliament in a pandemic. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Ruth Laborde. She's Health and Care Parliamentary Portfolio Committee Chairperson. Itai Rusike, he's Executive Director at Community Working Group on Health, CWGH. And Fadzi Jekemu, she's Programs Officer at Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. Thank you very much for appearing on the program today. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV network, ZTN, and our partners, the Southern Africa Parliamentary Support Trust, SAPS, and USAID. Well, that's it from me today. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and please, you all be safe.